My, how different Canadian politics have all of a sudden become. We have Legault in Quebec endorsing the Conservatives, and we have the farmers in Saskatchewan telling the government they will no longer pay the carbon tax. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. Before we get into that, though, I want to do some shout outs to some super thanks because I really appreciate it when that happens. It really helps out the channel. Actually, I say them as I receive them. So the first one is JJRB6WW, $50. They say thanks. I say thank you right back. I appreciate all of the assistance that you give me. Next one is one of my earliest supporter, Wickenden 1969, $10, says cheers, brother. Cheers right back at you. I appreciate all of your support. That's followed by John Kick, 7904, $6.99. He says thanks. I say thank you right back. Salad Girl, 2096, actually paid in British pounds, but I converted it to $18 because I didn't have a pound symbol on my keyboard. If I do, I don't know where it is. She says thanks, and I say thank you right on back. I appreciate it. William Pullen EQ4XY says he gave $6, and he says thanks, and I say thank you right back. Bugs28 gave $6.99, says thanks, keep up the great work. I could not have said it better myself, and I say thank you right back. I appreciate all the support. Canadian Commando, super thanks of $10. He says you got a great laugh. I say I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I hope it makes you smile. All right, let's get into the stories that we have for tonight. I picked this up from CTV News, and I got to tell you, though the article is quite short, there's a conflict in it that doesn't quite make sense. And I think that it's just an indication of the partisanship that CTV holds for wanting the Liberals to be there so they can eat at the corporate welfare trough. But I'll cover that in another video. Right now, I just want to go to this one. Quebec Premier Francois Legault is not telling voters which party he wants to see win the federal election. So they're right out of the gate. They say they're not telling anybody. Okay, in 2021, it's a change of strategy ahead of the last election in 2021. Legault called the Liberals and the NDP dangerous and strongly suggested he wanted the Conservatives to win a minority government. Now we can see for certainty that the Liberals and the NDP were dangerous. We can see that with absolute certainty. The only difference between the Liberal government and the NDP government of 2021 is Mark Carney. Otherwise, they're all the same. Legault told reporters today he hopes all three major parties respond to his demands on two major issues, Quebec's identity and prosperity. Newsflash for you, Premier Legault. We are all worried about prosperity, and it seems to me that you could be doing a lot more to put a lot of pressure on people to have, trade barriers removed and billion-dollar industries like the pipeline built. Just off the top of my head, when you're looking for prosperity, when you don't want to do any of the industry that makes countries wealthy beyond imagination. He called on parties to commit to reducing the number of temporary immigrants in Quebec by half and to protect key sectors in the province's economy, such as aerospace. Immigration is out of control. Again, Liberal NDP dangerous. Aerospace is just you guys taking a lot of tax dollars. Nothing's being produced. I get that there's a lot of airline companies in Quebec and the like, and there's one guy that's trying to get a satellite up into space, but he's had $3 billion from the government. It's been 3 or 4 years. He hasn't put up a single solid satellite. So let's start to pick up the pace. Now here's where it gets strange for me, because the article already said that he wasn't endorsing anybody, and then it says, but Legault singled out the Conservatives for praise because leader Pierre Poilievre promised Wednesday night to grant the province more power to select temporary immigrants. The Conservative leader told a crowd in Quebec City area that he would work with Legault government to cut in half the number of temporary workers and asylum seekers in the province. So I'm sure you can see where my confusion arises. On the one hand, they're saying that he didn't endorse anybody, and then on the other hand, he said, well, I asked for prosperity and controls, and at least the Conservatives were talking about giving us control over our immigration, which Quebec already has a lot of control over their immigration, and the Liberal Party, who Legault said was dangerous and was probably correct, was backdooring a lot of people into Montreal. They were backdooring a lot of people from Mexico, and that's something that they didn't appreciate, because Quebec is supposed to already have the privilege of having first choice of any immigrant that comes to Canada. They focus primarily on people that comes from French-speaking languages. So because France conquered a lot of Africa and conquered a lot of Asia and had it's quite an extensive empire at one point, there are a lot of individuals who are born French and then come to Canada, and Quebec likes to pick them first. In fact, if you can't speak French, they usually send you to Ontario. Of course, the immigration problem is larger than just worrying about what Quebec wants. But I can say with certainty that Legault singling out the Conservatives is him saying, I support the Conservatives. And if you think that that's just not the case, then you're not necessarily inside the mind of the Quebec statesman, because Quebec is very, very subtle with its politics. Going into Quebec City and talking to people puts Pierre Poilievre light years ahead of what Mark Carney has done, who only went into the stage in Montreal for a mock leadership debate where there was only liberals allowed in the building and no audience, and how he avoids talking to anybody in the TVA audience to do a debate on stage. That is something that the Quebec voter, I don't believe, will take very lightly, because they want to know that they're being treated well, and they know that the culture they've been trying so hard to protect is under threat, because they have a lot of people coming in that don't think the Québécois way, which is significantly important to a culture that tells themselves they are a distinct society. Before we talk about the other premiers and some of the political disasters that are coming out of Ontario, we're going to talk about Chrystia Freeland deciding that she was not going to pay people out for purchasing a Tesla under the EV mandates. The government had put out a rebate for people who were buying Tesla cars, who were buying all electric cars. And then they decided here today that they weren't going to allow people to get the rebate that they had promised. It's a bait and switch. It's illegal. I don't care what you cannot advertise something and then not follow through on it. There are so many consumer laws being violated in this one action that you think you're entitled to do because you are, virtue signaling, or you're just mad at Elon Musk because he has nothing to do with foreign policy in the United States, but he's the only person that you can treat with this abuse, that he's the only person you can bully. I'll get into that in a minute. Canada freezes rebate payments to Tesla, bars it from future programs due to tariffs. CEO Elon Musk is a close ally of Trump, who has slapped hefty tariffs on Canada. So right away, you're trying to get me to believe that CBC, of course, thinks it's a justifiable move because they have nothing else. They believe that it's justifiable because they're partisan, because they are attacking Elon Musk for his politics. And they further believe that by destroying the electric car industry of the largest electric car manufacturer on earth at a time when cars are being targeted left, right, and center by the American administration, she's somehow going to improve Canada's options for buying new vehicles. Canada has frozen all rebate payments for Tesla and banned the electric vehicle maker from future EV rebate payments, Transport Minister Chrystia Freeland said on Tuesday. No rebate payments will be made until each claim is individually investigated and determined to be valid, Freeland said in an email. Freeland also directed Transport Canada to revise eligibility requirements for future incentive zero-emission vehicle program to ensure Tesla vehicles are no longer eligible as long as the illegitimate and illegal U.S. tariffs are imposed on Canada. This is childish. This is accelerating the problem, and it targets the wrong thing. It doesn't matter what you do, what you say. That's why you've had 2 months of being aware that the tariffs were coming. I mean, the man has initiated tariffs 2 or 3 other times. You knew it was coming, and the best response you have is, well, I'm not going to give the corporation of Tesla Canada the money that they were promised by our government if they were to go ahead and give this incentive to people for buying a Tesla car. I mean, I don't think childish begins to cover it. But it's certainly a very immature and very provincial way to look at politics. People want to inflame the problem with Donald Trump because somehow in their mind, they feel that they can hold their own. And I have told you from the very beginning, we cannot. As I speak to you, Ford and all of the other major car dealers are opening massive organizations down in the United States with the option of building their own electrical plant They are going where the money is. They know that they can't withstand the liberal tariffs on, or the liberal carbon tax on steel, the liberal carbon tax on all of the precious metals that go into a car, aluminum, rubber, the amount of things that their car, like a car is just a simple moving carbon tax to the liberal government, right? Where they don't want to build any more. You'll remember when Stephen Guilbeault said he doesn't want to build any roads. You'll remember when Stephen Guilbeault was telling you that if you want to have, there's going to be mass transportation everywhere, which is all going to be electric. I guess it's not going to be built by the premier electric car manufacturer. The degree of immature that this move is, the degree of ridiculous that this move is, can only be described as elementary school. That they're somehow sitting around the bathroom making one of the worst plans you could have, telling people that have earned that money that they can't have that money. Right now, there are Canadian people who work for the Tesla Corporation who are out their bonuses, who have been waiting for that money to be released by the federal government. How come the federal government always promises rebates, always promises that they're going to give money back, and yet it always ends up that they have some excuse not to do that? Now we will speak to the disappointment that is Doug Ford, who was campaigning on being a big tough guy. He had all of these economic strategies, 4-year mandate, all the rest of it, and yet here we have. They've known for months, literally, that this tariff was coming on vehicles, and this tariff is going on the vehicles is going to destroy Southern Ontario. Those jobs are going to go away and never come back, just like that did last time when we bailed them out in Oshawa and they moved to Mexico anyway. Because they go where the money is. And it's time that these leaders who pretend like we're going to virtue signal our way through life understand that. I thought Mark Carney was supposed to be Mr. I'm going to be able to negotiate with Trump. Doesn't seem like you're doing a very good job there, but it seems like he's ignoring you. He doesn't care what you're saying. He doesn't care what you think. It seems that you just pretend to Canadians that you have an option, and reality is that Donald Trump can do what he wants, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So stop trying to tell yourself that we're going to be targeting Trump and start to worry about what's going on in this country, which you've had 2 months to get prepared for. And as we see here, you have done nothing. Now we'll listen to what Doug Ford sent out a tweet. President Trump is at it again. No, he's not at it again, bud. He told you it was coming. You just seem to hold your breath and put your elbows up and hide your head like an ostrich in the sand and did nothing. Nothing. His 25% tariffs on cars and light trucks will do nothing more than increase costs for hardworking American families. That's not true at all. U.S. markets are already on decline as the president causes more chaos and uncertainty. He's putting American jobs at risk. There's absolutely no truth in that statement. I know they want you to believe that somehow it's going bad for the Americans, but I promise you it's just simply not true. These companies are coming with billions of dollars and dropping shovels in the ground. And there's nothing better than giving the people who work heavy equipment, who run electricity, who do the welding jobs. Nothing better than that. That is the secret to the middle class. That is the middle class. I've spoken with Carney. We agree Canada needs to stand firm, strong, and united. I fully support the federal government preparing retaliatory tariffs to show that we'll never back down. So your solution, you and Carney's solution, is to say that anything in America is going to be more expensive while everything from China can be ignored because they build it with slave labor and they don't have any problem putting the tariffs on two of our largest industries, soybeans and canola oil. Not to mention what they're doing with the fish, not to mention what they do with the jade, not to mention what they do with many of our natural resources. You're being awfully quiet on the war that China is putting on us with tariffs. You don't seem to be saying anything about that. And your solution, while all of these jobs flood the country, is you're going to say, well, you can get better at AI so you don't have to spend your severance as fast. Now, in anything that comes in from America, where all of the industry is currently going to be, rather than leave that alone and let Canadians pay for that with what little money they're going to have, you want to add prices to it so that everything becomes more expensive. So on the one hand, we got the liberal carbon tax driving prices up through the roof. We got inflation making our dollar worth nothing. We have the liberal government beating on their chests and tough talk to the economy that could literally wipe us off the face of the earth without even knowing we were there. I mean, they're going to be so mammoth. Of course, anybody with the rudimentary understanding of how these things work knows what I'm saying to be true. I mean, there's no secret in it. Trump knows it. Musk knows it. Everybody knows it, that they're about to have the economy for the ages. And Canada, rather than becoming part of it, is driving a wedge between the United States, between the richest country on earth that's about to have the best economy on the face of the earth, and cozying up to China. However, Premier Scott Moe understands that, and it was a cleverly worded release that he made where he told the federal government in no uncertain terms that he is no longer going to be collecting the industrial carbon tax, which means no farmer has to pay it, and I couldn't be more excited by it.
Saskatchewan is now a carbon tax-free province, the first carbon tax-free province in Canada. Now that the two major federal parties and their leaders have announced their plans for removing the carbon tax, Saskatchewan is taking the next step by reducing the industrial carbon tax rate charged in our province to zero, to give our consumers a break and to make our industries more competitive in this new tariff environment. So what does this mean for you? Well, the immediate effect is the removal of the carbon tax on your Sask power bills, saving Saskatchewan families and small businesses hundreds of dollars a year. And in the longer term, it will reduce the cost of other consumer products that have the industrial carbon tax built right into their price. Saskatchewan is producing some of the most sustainable products in the world today. We want to create the environment to produce more of those sustainable products, to make our industries more competitive in the face of U.S. and Chinese tariffs, and to protect and create Canadian jobs right here in Saskatchewan. Making Saskatchewan a carbon tax-free province will do just that. And I would hope that all of the parties running in the federal election would agree with those objectives and allow the provinces to regulate in this area without imposing the federal backstop.
So here we can see that Scott Moe is throwing down the gauntlet. He has already told them before that he's not collecting the carbon tax. They tried desperately to take him to court. He refused, and then I don't know where it is in the court system. But I know that there are people out west that pay more carbon tax than they actually do for the heat that goes into their home. And that's the kind of thing when the people in Nova Scotia, and they're well aware, but the people in Nova Scotia are getting a break and a discount and don't have to pay the carbon tax for burning fuel that's quite a lot dirtier. They don't have any they're just not interested in that kind of stuff. And so now we are looking at what can only be described as a unity crisis. Mark Carney's obsession with the carbon tax has to be taken to a country that's actually dirty. I think that he should try to impose it on China since he has so much investment over there, and since they produce so much smog on a daily basis, since they have a coal fire after coal fire electrical plant, and most of that coal comes out of Canada, which has to pay the carbon tax when they dig it out of the ground. All of that money goes nowhere. I mean, it's a tax. It's supposed to be used by the government, right? And in reality, there's no improvement in our lives. So where is it going? Where's this money going? How is this money helping the Canadian people? How is it that Saskatchewan farmers' food should be more expensive than the food that we're getting out of Mexico? How is it that we should be paying for Saudi Arabian oil less than we're paying for Canadian oil? There's so many things that is wrong with the carbon tax, and Scott Moe knows it, and many people know it. Millions of people know it. It's Mark Carney's refusal to bend. It's Stephen Guilbeault. It's Mark Carney. It's this agenda that they have that somehow they're going to impress the world. They're not impressing anybody, and they're certainly not impressing me because I don't want to be in a terrible economy. There are people that come to this country looking for hopes and dreams, and you're destroying their way of life so that you can turn it into some dystopian nightmare that might resemble what it looked like during the time of Robin Hood, when people didn't have the right to have food, they didn't have the right to have a home, they didn't have the right to be represented by their government, and Robin Hood had to come in and start to rob the government and give it back to the people. I mean, what are we talking about here? We're talking about an entire province refusing to acknowledge the laws put down by the federal government. It's essentially rebellion. It's essentially civil war. It's essentially separation. I mean, the words that apply to this are not anything that the federal government is capable of handling, and they can't even handle their own press corps, never mind handling Donald Trump, Elon Musk, who are both wealthy men who understand large business much more than an investment banker. These guys are the guys that put their own money in, not somebody else's money. Mark Carney can't even handle his press corps, and you think he's going to handle Scott Moe, and he's going to handle Danielle Smith, and he's going to handle any of the other premiers that come to their senses? And there's only one way to solve the problem, and the first step is to remove the industrial carbon tax. That's step number one. We have to do that first. We have to build this country. We have to realize that the only way that we can get things done is to get them done quickly, not wait for Mark Carney to hold your hand, not wait for regulations to decide that you're going to have to build this new $55,000 extra house so that you can be environmentally friendly. I mean, what are you talking about? The materials are still going to be the same, and you think that somehow you're going to increase the cost of it by $55,000 and it's going to improve the economy? Nobody has the money. And with every passing day, we come closer and closer to these tariffs. And with every passing day, we see that for all of his talk, Mark Carney is not the guy to stand up to Donald Trump. He's too flaccid. He's too timid. He's too tepid. And he doesn't understand what it means to get down into the dirt to roll around. Mr. Elbows Up is only covering his own head while he kneels down on the ground and hopes that it all goes past him when he's not looking. Now, Scott Moe, who has a lot of investment in going into the United States with much of the fertilizer that they use being manufactured in Canada, which is carbon taxed out the yin-yang, has said that it's enough is enough is enough. He's not coming into a growing season facing the Chinese tariffs, and then he's going to be dumping millions of dollars into the Ottawa coffers so they can turn around and tell him that he's not being environmentally clean when the whole wide world tries to copy how they grow food in Saskatchewan. And I'm not kidding you. The whole wide world looks at Saskatchewan and says, how are they doing it there? And how can we do that here so that we will get the yields, so we will keep it clean? But carbon tax Carney can't get that through his head because he's obsessed. He's obsessed. And that obsession is going to destroy this country once and for all. You let me know what you think down in the comments. Am I being too hard on the carbon tax, or do you think that the carbon tax has to go? I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.